They're not ready for that level of thinking yet. The words came from Senator Carlson, sitting at the head of the conference table, looking directly at me while addressing everyone else. The room erupted in laughter. Genuine laughter, not polite chuckles. Real amusement at my expense. My proposal sat in front of them. 63 pages, months of research, data analysis, policy recommendations, a comprehensive plan to reform infrastructure contracting. I had worked nights and weekends, sacrificed time with family, poured everything into this document, and it was being dismissed without discussion, without consideration, without even basic respect. Perhaps we can revisit this when you have more experience, Carlson added. More laughter. A few people shook their heads. Others were already checking their phones. Moving on. My moment was over before it began. I sat there feeling my face burn, trying to maintain composure, trying not to show how deeply it hurt. But inside, something was breaking. Not my confidence. My illusion. The illusion that good work mattered. That preparation equaled respect. That the system valued merit. In seconds, months of effort became a joke. And I became invisible. Just like that. Dismissed. Diminished. Erased. The press release went out that afternoon. I saw it on my phone during the train ride home. Senator Carlson announces new infrastructure task force. The article listed team members, senior advisors, policy experts. My name appeared near the bottom. One line, also contributing, Quinlan Reed, promising but inexperienced policy analyst. Promising but inexperienced. That phrase would follow me for months. A polite way of saying I did not matter. A professional way of calling me irrelevant. They did not just ignore my work. They defined me, shaped the narrative, controlled how others would perceive me. Every introduction afterward included those words. Every meeting began with that context. Promising, which meant not yet valuable. Inexperienced, which meant not worth listening to. The phrase became my label, my limitation, my ceiling, and there was nothing I could do about it. Arguing against it would prove it true. Accepting it meant staying diminished. I was trapped in a narrative someone else had written, a story where I was the minor character, the supporting role, the person who did not quite belong at the important table. And Senator Carlson had written that story deliberately, carefully, with perfect political precision. My name was Quinlan Reed, 31 years old. I had learned something early in my political career. Something most people never understood. The most dangerous place in politics was not the spotlight, not the opposition, not the public criticism. It was being underestimated. When people dismissed you, they stopped watching you, stopped considering you a threat, stopped guarding their words and actions around you. They became careless, revealed things they should have hidden, made mistakes they would never make with someone they respected. I had watched it happen to others. Talented people written off as too young or too inexperienced or too idealistic. People who saw things clearly but were never given the platform to speak. Most of them eventually left, gave up on politics, found other careers where merit mattered more than perception. But I was not going to leave, was not going to accept the narrative, was not going to let Carlson's dismissal define my career. Instead, I was going to use it, let them underestimate me, let them think I was irrelevant. Let them forget I was even there, because underestimated people saw everything, and I was about to see a lot. The exclusion started within days. Meetings began happening without me. Email chains I used to be copied on suddenly stopped including me. Calendar invites disappeared. I would arrive at the office to find colleagues returning from discussions I knew nothing about. Oh, that was just a quick session. Nothing important, they would say, but decisions were being made. Policy directions chosen, budget allocations determined, all behind doors I was no longer invited through. When I did attend meetings, conversations would stop when I entered, mid-sentence silence, awkward pauses, then someone would redirect to safe topics. Surface-level discussion, nothing substantive, nothing real. I was not part of the inner circle anymore, not trusted with sensitive information, not included in strategic planning. I had been moved outside the system, pushed to the margins, made peripheral. At first, it stung, felt like punishment. like being slowly erased from relevance. But after a few weeks, something shifted in my perception. Being outside the system meant I could observe it differently, without the pressure to participate, without the need to protect my position, without the blinders that came from being inside. From the outside, I could see everything more clearly, and what I saw started to concern me deeply. Numbers that did not match. That was the first thing I noticed. Budget reports that did not align with project descriptions. Funding amounts that seemed inflated for the stated work. I started reviewing public documents more carefully, comparing current proposals to historical data, looking for patterns. The infrastructure projects being approved were consistently over budget, not by small amounts, by 30 to 40%, all following the same pattern. Initial proposals with reasonable costs, then revised budgets submitted weeks later with massive increases, minimal justification for the changes, projects that were approved too quickly, contracts that should have required competitive bidding were being sole-sourced, environmental reviews that normally took months were being expedited in weeks, oversight procedures that existed for accountability were being waived for urgency, and there was silence where there should have been scrutiny. No one was questioning these patterns. No committee members were demanding explanations. No watchdog groups were raising concerns. Just smooth approvals, quick signatures, money flowing without friction. I started keeping notes. Nothing official, just personal observations, dates, numbers, patterns, because something was clearly wrong. And being dismissed meant I had time to notice it, time to document it, time to understand it, while they forgot I existed. Then I saw something that made my blood run cold. My proposal, the one that had been mocked and dismissed 3 months ago. It appeared in a new policy document, not credited to me, not acknowledged as my work, but using my exact research, my data, my recommendations, except it had been rewritten, fundamentally altered, where my original proposal increased oversight on infrastructure contracts. The new version recommended streamlining approval processes, where I had suggested competitive bidding requirements. The revision called for expedited sole source authorizations, where I had outlined accountability measures. The rewrite emphasized reduced bureaucracy. Every reform I had proposed to prevent corruption had been inverted, twisted, turned into policies that would enable corruption, and it was being presented by Senator Carlson himself at a major policy conference as his own vision, using my months of research to build a framework that protected exactly what I had tried to expose. The betrayal was complete, not just dismissing my work, stealing it, corrupting it, using it against its own purpose. I sat in my office, staring at the policy document, hands shaking, understanding finally settling in. This was never about my experience level. This was about my proposal threatening something valuable, something worth protecting, something Carlson needed to bury. I confronted him the next morning, found him in his office before staff arrived. "Senator, we need to talk about the infrastructure policy document." He looked up from his desk, smiled, completely calm. "Ah, Quinlan, good morning." "That's my research," I said. "My proposal. You dismissed it publicly, then rewrote it to protect the exact problems I was trying to fix." The smile did not fade. "This is how politics works," he said simply. "No denial, no apology, no attempt to justify or explain, just a statement of fact. You had good research, solid data, but naive conclusions. So I used a foundation and corrected the direction. Corrected it to remove all accountability," I said. "Corrected it to serve the actual interests involved," he replied. "Infrastructure development requires partnerships, relationships, trust. Your proposal would have destroyed all of that with unnecessary oversight. Unnecessary oversight of taxpayer money." He stood up, walked around his desk. "You're young, idealistic. That's admirable. But you don't understand how things actually work. The proposals that get approved are the ones that serve everyone's interests, not just the public's." The truth was laid out plainly. No pretense, no political language, just honesty, his version of it. "You can either learn to work within the system," he continued, "or you can stay irrelevant. Your choice." He walked past me, out of his office, Conversation over. That was the moment everything changed. When I stopped trying to prove myself to them. When I stopped seeking their approval or respect. I did not need their validation anymore. I needed their secrets. And I was going to find them. The deeper I looked, the clearer the pattern became. I started with public records, budget documents, contract awards, environmental filings, all available through Freedom of Information requests. Tedious work, hundreds of pages to review, but patterns emerged quickly. Contracts were being recycled through the same shell companies, different names, different corporate registrations, but the same business addresses, same registered agents, same payment processors. Budgets were inflated systematically. Original proposals would request reasonable amounts. Then revised submissions would increase costs by exact percentages, always between 35 and 42%. Never higher, never lower, as if following a formula. And the money was being quietly redirected. Official budgets showed payments to contractors for specific work. But project completion reports showed significantly less work actually done. The difference disappeared into consulting fees and administrative costs and contingency expenses. Vague categories that accounted for millions. This was not random. This was not simple government waste. This was structured, organized, coordinated, a system built deliberately, with rules, with patterns, with careful planning. And my proposal had threatened to expose it, had recommended exactly the oversight needed to reveal these schemes. So Carlson had buried it, stolen it, rewritten it to protect what I had tried to uncover. Now I understood why I had been dismissed so completely. I was not wrong. I was dangerous. I could not investigate this alone. Did not have access to the internal documents I needed. Could not verify suspicions without seeing actual communications. Needed someone inside who could help. That person found me. A junior analyst named Trevor Huang, 26 years old, worked in budget compliance, had access to financial systems I could not reach. He approached me quietly after a routine meeting, asked if we could talk privately. We met at a coffee shop miles from the office. I saw what they did to you, he said quietly. At that meeting, when they laughed, I was there. I waited, let him continue, and I've seen what happened since. How they excluded you, how they use your research, how they're pushing through contracts that make no sense. Why are you telling me this? I asked. He hesitated. Because I have access you don't. And I think you're the only person who actually wants to know the truth. Trevor explained his position. He reviewed budget submissions, verified funding sources, processed payment authorizations. He saw the real numbers, the actual flows of money, the hidden transfers. I can't do anything with what I see, he said. I'm too junior, too powerless. If I raise concerns, I'll be fired. But you're already outside, already dismissed. You have nothing to lose. He was right. I had already been labeled irrelevant, already excluded, already diminished, which meant I could ask questions others could not, could investigate without raising suspicion, could gather evidence without triggering alarms. What do you need? I asked. Proof, he said simply. Real proof, not suspicions, not patterns. Hard evidence that this corruption exists. Trevor smiled slightly. I can get you that, if you're willing to use it. Through Trevor, I gained access to internal documents I should never have seen. Not through hacking, not through theft, just through his legitimate access and his willingness to share. Budget spreadsheets showing real versus reported costs. Contract modifications that changed terms after approval. Payment records revealing money flowing to shell companies. Email chains discussing timeline coordination. Meeting minutes referencing preferred contractors and streamlined processes. Every piece of evidence documented the scheme further, showed the scope, revealed the participants. What they carefully hid in meetings was written explicitly in files, because they never expected anyone to look, never thought these internal documents would be reviewed by someone outside their circle, never imagined a junior analyst would risk his career by sharing them. We met weekly. Always different locations, always careful. Trevor would bring USB drives with copied files. I would review everything, cross-reference with public records, build Comprehensive documentation. The picture that emerged was staggering, larger than I had initially suspected, deeper, more coordinated. This was not one corrupt official. This was not isolated misconduct. This was systematic fraud involving dozens of people across multiple departments. And every piece of evidence I gathered made one thing clearer. Exposing this would destroy careers, would end political futures, would send people to prison, which meant I had to be absolutely certain, absolutely thorough, absolutely unassailable. One mistake, and they would bury everything. Bury me, bury the truth. So I kept gathering, kept documenting, kept building a case they could not deny. It was not just one department involved. That realization hit me after 2 months of investigation. The infrastructure contracts involved the Transportation Department, the Environmental Compliance Office, the Budget Authorization Committee, the Legal Review Board, multiple officials at each level, all coordinating, all approving suspicious contracts, all benefiting somehow. Shell companies at one contract were connected to family members, to former staffers, to political allies. Money flowed through these companies and then dispersed. Campaign contributions, consulting fees, investment opportunities, a network of corruption that protected itself through mutual benefit. Everyone involved had incentive to keep it hidden. Everyone profited. Everyone participated. That was why Carlson had been so confident, so dismissive, so open about how politics worked. Because the system was designed to protect itself, built with redundancies, with coordinated silence, with shared guilt that ensured loyalty. Exposing one person would expose everyone, which meant no one would expose anyone. They were safe, protected by collective corruption, by systems that made oversight impossible, by networks that punished questioners and rewarded participants. I was looking at something far bigger than contract fraud. I was looking at institutional capture, at government machinery repurposed for private benefit, at democracy undermined by coordinated theft. And I had just scratched the surface, just begun to understand how deep this went, how many people were involved, how much money was being stolen. The scope was terrifying, but it also meant something important. If I could expose this, if I could prove it publicly, if I could make it undeniable, the impact would be massive, unstoppable, system-changing. I just needed the right moment, the right platform, the right opportunity, and I needed to survive long enough to use it. The more I uncovered, the more careful I became. I stopped using my work phone for anything sensitive, stopped emailing documents, stopped discussing the investigation at the office. Meetings with Trevor happened off-grid, different locations every time, phones left in cars, cash payments only, no digital trail. We were paranoid, but paranoia was survival, because if they realized I knew, if they understood I was building a case, if they suspected I had evidence, I would not just be dismissed, I would disappear politically. Or worse, people who threatened this level of corruption did not just lose jobs, they lost credibility, lost reputations, lost careers. Manufactured scandals would emerge, false accusations, coordinated smears, everything needed to destroy someone completely. I had watched it happen to others, reformers who pushed too hard, investigators who asked too many questions, whistleblowers who spoke too soon, all destroyed systematically, professionally, permanently. So I stayed invisible, kept my head down, acted like the dismissed, irrelevant analyst they thought I was, let them forget I existed, while I gathered evidence they never saw coming, while I built a case they never anticipated, while I prepared for a moment they could not imagine. The risk was constant, real, terrifying, but so was the alternative. Walking away, letting them win, accepting that corruption was just how things worked. I could not do that, would not do that. So I kept going, carefully, quietly, preparing. I organized everything methodically, created folders for each contract, each official, each shell company, cross-referenced transactions, built timelines, documented connections. Every piece of evidence was backed up, multiple copies, multiple locations, encrypted drives, cloud storage, Physical documents in safe deposit boxes. If something happened to me, the evidence would survive. Trevor knew where everything was stored, had access codes, had instructions. The case I was building was comprehensive, undeniable. Emails proving coordination, contracts showing fraud, financial records revealing theft, meeting minutes documenting conspiracy. Each piece alone might be explained away, might be dismissed as misunderstanding or poor record keeping or innocent error. But together, the evidence was overwhelming, a pattern so clear, so documented, so extensive that denial would be impossible. Months of work, hundreds of hours, thousands of documents, all pointing to the same conclusion: systematic corruption, coordinated fraud, millions stolen, and Senator Carlson at the center of it all. But having evidence was not enough. Timing would decide everything. Release it too early, and they would bury it, claim it was falsified, attack my credibility, spin the narrative before anyone could verify the truth. I needed the perfect moment, the right platform, the opportunity where exposure would be impossible to suppress, where evidence would have to be examined, where the truth could not be hidden. I did not know when that moment would come, but I would recognize it, and I would be ready. The moment arrived unexpectedly. A major public infrastructure project failed spectacularly. The Riverside Bridge renovation, approved 2 years ago, budgeted at $47 million, supposed to be completed in 18 months. After 26 months, the bridge was only 60% finished. Structural problems had emerged. Safety concerns halted work, and an audit revealed that only $32 million of the approved budget could be accounted for. $15 million were missing, gone into contingency costs and consulting fees and administrative expenses that could not be documented. The public was outraged. Taxpayers demanding answers. Media coverage relentless. The state attorney general announced a formal investigation, and suddenly everyone was looking for explanations, for accountability, for someone to blame. The political establishment panicked, scrambled for responses, needed to control the narrative before it destroyed them. Senator Carlson held a press conference, promised transparency, called for reform, announced that a special public inquiry would be held to investigate what went wrong, to determine who was responsible, to restore public trust. The inquiry would be televised, public testimony, expert witnesses, complete transparency. They thought they could control it, manage the story, blame lower-level contractors and administrators, protect the real architects of the corruption. But they had just created exactly what I needed: a public platform, an official forum, a moment where evidence would become part of the permanent record, where suppression would be impossible, the opportunity one had been waiting for, and they had handed it to me. 2 weeks before the inquiry, I received an unexpected call. Senator Carlson's office, requesting a meeting. I agreed, curious what they wanted. Carlson greeted me warmly, like we were old friends, like he had not dismissed and humiliated me, like everything was fine. "Quinlan, I want to personally invite you to participate in the upcoming inquiry," he said. "We need diverse voices, different perspectives. Your infrastructure expertise would be valuable." I understood immediately. This was theater, political cover, a way to show inclusivity, to demonstrate that all viewpoints were being considered. I would be the token young analyst, the promising but inexperienced voice, there to make the inquiry look comprehensive, while they carefully controlled the actual narrative. They still did not see me as a threat, still thought I was irrelevant, still believed dismissing me months ago had neutralized any danger I might pose. "I'd be honored to participate," I said, keeping my voice neutral, showing nothing. "Excellent," Carlson said. "Just a supporting voice, of course. We have the senior experts leading the testimony, but your perspective will add depth. Supporting voice, minor role, control participation." They thought they were using me, thought they were managing me, thought they were safe. They were wrong. I accepted the invitation, not to support them, not to add credibility to their theater, but to confront them on their own stage, with evidence they never knew existed, with truth they never expected. They had invited me back into the room, given me a platform, created the exact opportunity one needed, and they had no idea what was coming. The night before the inquiry, I reviewed everything one final time, every document organized, every timeline verified, every connection proven, no mistakes, no gaps, no weaknesses they could exploit. The evidence was comprehensive, unassailable, devastating. Trevor had helped me prepare the presentation. Digital files ready to display, hard copy for distribution, everything organized for maximum impact. We had rehearsed the delivery, anticipated counterarguments, prepared responses to every deflection they might attempt. No emotion, no anger, no personal attacks. Just facts, just evidence, just truth presented so clearly that denial would be impossible. I barely slept that night, not from nervousness, from anticipation, from knowing that tomorrow everything would change, that months of work would finally matter, that the truth would finally be heard. Years ago, they had laughed at my proposal, dismissed my research, made me invisible. Tomorrow, I would make them see me, make them hear me, make them understand exactly what they had underestimated, not with arguments, not with appeals, with evidence they could not deny, with proof they could not suppress, with truth they could not hide. The inquiry would start at 9 a.m. Public testimony, live broadcast, official record. They thought they would control the narrative, manage the story, protect themselves. They were about to learn otherwise, because the most dangerous person in politics was not the loudest critic. It was the quiet observer, the underestimated analyst, the person they forgot was watching. And I had been watching everything. I walked into the chamber at 8:45, early, prepared, calm. The room was already filling. Journalists setting up cameras, officials taking their seats, public gallery packed with concerned citizens. Senator Carlson sat at the main table, surrounded by senior advisors, looking confident, prepared, in control. He glanced at me briefly, nodded, smiled slightly, still completely unaware, still believing I was just the supporting voice, the minor participant, the token inclusion. Other officials arrived, people I had documented, people whose corruption I had proven, people who had no idea what I carried in my briefcase. They chatted casually, relaxed, confident that this inquiry would go exactly as planned, that they would express concern, promise reforms, blame contractors, emerge looking responsible and committed. The chairman called a hearing to order at 9 a.m. sharp, explained the procedures, outlined the timeline, emphasized the importance of transparency and accountability. Then they started with prepared statements, senior officials speaking, carefully crafted words, expressing disappointment, calling for reform, promising oversight, all rehearsed, all controlled, all meaningless. I sat quietly, waiting for my turn, knowing it would come, knowing they had scheduled me last. The supporting voice, the minor perspective, the unimportant contribution. They had no idea they had scheduled their own destruction, had created the perfect moment for their exposure, had given me exactly what I needed. My turn came at 11:30. The chairman called my name. Mr. Reed, please share your perspective on infrastructure oversight. I stood, walked to the podium, looked directly at the cameras. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, but I'm not here to share perspective. The room went quiet. I'm here to present evidence. I did not argue, did not theorize, did not offer opinions. I simply presented. Documents appeared on the screens throughout the chamber. Real contracts, real budgets, real evidence. This is the Riverside Bridge contract. I said calmly, approved budget of $47 million. Actual construction costs based on industry standards should have been $32 million. The numbers displayed clearly, side by side. The $15 million difference was allocated to consulting fees paid to 3 companies. I showed the corporate registrations, the shell company structures, the hidden ownership. These companies share the same registered agent, same business address, same payment processor. They are not independent contractors. They are coordinated entities designed to obscure fund transfers. Murmurs spread through chamber. Officials shifting uncomfortably. Carlson staring at me, face pale. This pattern appears in 17 other infrastructure projects approved over the past 3 years. Same percentage inflation, same shell company structures, same fund diversion. I displayed the complete list. Every project, every amount, every company. Total funds diverted through the scheme, $63 million. The room erupted. Journalists typing frantically, cameras zooming in, public gallery reacting audibly. The chairman banged his gavel, tried to restore order, but I was not finished. The evidence shows coordination across multiple departments: transportation, environmental compliance, budget authorization, legal review. Names appeared on screen. Officials whose signatures appeared on suspicious approvals, whose emails coordinated timelines, whose meeting minutes discussed preferred contractors, people sitting in this very room, watching their corruption displayed publicly, permanently, undeniably. The carefully controlled narrative was breaking, and I had barely started. I continued systematically. Email evidence next. Communications between officials discussing contract coordination. These emails showed deliberate timeline alignment, rushing environmental reviews, expediting budget approvals, waiving competitive bidding requirements. The actual messages displayed, words they had written, plans they had made, coordination they had hidden, meeting minutes from a budget authorization committee reference, streamlined processes for preferred partnerships. I showed the documents, their own records, their own admissions. Financial records prove that money flowed from these shell companies to entities connected to public officials. Bank transfers, payment records, corporate ownership trails, campaign contributions, consulting fees to family members, investment opportunities for political allies. Every connection documented, every benefit proven, every participant exposed. The room was chaos now. Officials standing, objecting, demanding to know where I got this information, claiming it was falsified, insisting I had no authority. But the chairman was studying the documents. The journalists were recording everything. The public was watching, and the evidence spoke for itself. This is not speculation. I said clearly, this is documentation. Emails from official accounts, contracts from public records, financial transfers from legitimate banks, meeting minutes from official proceedings. I paused. Let that settle. Everything I'm presenting today is verified, backed by multiple sources, available for immediate investigation. Then I displayed one final document, the one that connected everything, the authorization that proved who was at the center, who had orchestrated it all, who had protected the scheme. Senator Carlson's signature, clear, undeniable, approving the very contracts I had documented. The same man who had dismissed my proposal, who had stolen my research, who had called me inexperienced, now exposed completely, publicly, permanently. The names came next. I went through them systematically, calmly. Officials who had signed fraudulent approvals, contractors who operated shell companies, administrators who had coordinated timelines, every person involved in the scheme, every participant in the corruption, every beneficiary of the fraud. Deputy Director Maxwell authorized 17 of the 22 contracts I've documented. His face appeared on screen, his signatures displayed. Budget Officer Williams expedited approvals that should have required committee review. Her emails shown, her coordination proven. Environmental Director Foster waived standard review procedures for projects connected to preferred contractors. His meeting minutes displayed, his decisions documented, one by one, name by name, evidence by evidence. The entire network exposed, the complete system revealed. And finally, I came to the architect, the person who had built and protected it all. Senator Carlson dismissed my infrastructure reform proposal 8 months ago, called it naive, said I was not ready for that level of thinking. I paused. That proposal recommended oversight measures that would have exposed exactly what I'm presenting today. Competitive bidding requirements, financial audits, environmental review standards, everything needed to prevent this corruption. The irony was perfect, complete. Instead of implementing those reforms, The senator rewrote my proposal to eliminate oversight, to streamline approvals, to protect the very system I had tried to expose. I displayed both documents, my original, his rewrite, side by side. He did not dismiss my proposal because it was inexperienced. He dismissed it because it was dangerous, because it threatened a corruption scheme worth tens of millions of dollars, because I had accidentally uncovered exactly what he needed to keep hidden. Carlson sat frozen, unable to speak, unable to defend, unable to do anything except watch his world collapse. On camera, in public, permanently recorded, Senator Carlson tried to respond, stood slowly, voice shaking. These allegations are... I cut him off. Not allegations, documentation, evidence of everything I had presented, the master file, everything I've shown today pages, is now part of the official inquiry record, available for immediate investigation, verified through multiple independent sources. The chairman was pale, studying the evidence, understanding the scope. Mr. Reed, how long have you been gathering this information? 8 months, I said, since the day my reform proposal was dismissed, since the day I was excluded from meetings, since the day I was made irrelevant. I looked directly at Carlson. Since the day you underestimated me. The chamber was absolute chaos now. Journalists shouting questions. Officials conferring frantically. Security trying to maintain order. But it was too late. The evidence was public. The truth was out. The corruption was exposed. Carlson tried to leave, his lawyers surrounding him, moving toward the exit. But federal agents were already entering, responding to evidence submitted in real time to prosecutors, responding to documentation of federal crimes. They stopped him at the door, read him his rights. The cameras captured everything. The same cameras that were supposed to show his controlled narrative, now showing his arrest, his humiliation, his complete destruction. Other arrests followed within hours. Officials named in my evidence, taken into custody, charged with fraud, conspiracy, corruption. The network I had exposed was being dismantled in real time, publicly, permanently, unstoppably, and I stood at the podium, the underestimated analyst, the inexperienced voice, the person they had laughed at, now the person who destroyed them all. By the end of that week, the political landscape had completely transformed. Senator Carlson resigned before formal charges were filed, trying to minimize damage, trying to maintain some dignity, failing at both. 17 other officials resigned or were suspended. Investigations launched into every project I had documented, every contract I had exposed, every company I had connected. The state attorney general announced a comprehensive review. Federal prosecutors opened multiple cases. Congressional oversight committees demanded hearings. Everything I had worked for, everything I had gathered, everything I had prepared, was now driving the largest corruption scandal in state history. The media coverage was relentless. Every channel, every website, every newspaper. My presentation played on loop. My evidence analyzed by experts. My testimony dissected and confirmed. They called me brave, called me a hero, called me the whistleblower who changed everything. But I was not a whistleblower. I was just someone who paid attention, who documented what I saw, who refused to accept that corruption was just how things worked. The governor appointed me to lead the Reform Commission, tasked with rebuilding oversight systems, implementing the exact proposals I had made 8 months ago, the proposals that had been laughed at, dismissed as naive, called inexperienced thinking. Now they were state policy, official mandate, the foundation for systemic change. And the same people who had dismissed me were now praising me, claiming they had always recognized my potential, insisting they had supported my work. Politics, memory, narrative control. But I remembered every dismissal, every exclusion, every moment of being underestimated. And I used that memory to stay humble, to stay focused, to remember why this mattered. The reforms moved quickly. New oversight boards established, independent audit requirements, competitive bidding mandates, financial transparency rules. Everything my original proposal had recommended, everything Carlson had tried to bury, now implemented, enforced, protected by law. Shell companies were investigated, funds recovered, contractors prosecuted. The entire network I had exposed was being systematically dismantled. Former officials cooperated with investigators, providing testimony, revealing additional corruption, expanding the case beyond what even I had documented. The scope was staggering. Years of fraud, hundreds of millions stolen, systems corrupted at every level. But it was being fixed, reformed, rebuilt, because one person had refused to accept it, had refused to stay silent, had refused to be dismissed. The junior analyst who helped me, Trevor, received protection and recognition, his role acknowledged, his courage praised, his career protected. Others who had been silenced came forward, told their stories, shared their evidence, revealed the pressure they had faced to stay quiet, the threats, the career destruction, the coordinated intimidation, all of it documented now, all of it exposed, all of it part of the permanent record. The system that had protected corruption was being replaced with transparency, with accountability, with oversight that actually worked. It was not perfect. Politics never was. But it was better, significantly better, because people were watching now, because evidence mattered now, because underestimated voices had proven they could change everything. And I had been the first, the catalyst, the person who showed it was possible. 6 months after the inquiry, I stood in the same chamber where I had been dismissed, where my proposal had been mocked, where my career had been diminished. But everything was different now. The corruption task force I led had just presented its final recommendations. Comprehensive reforms, systemic changes, new laws protecting whistleblowers, new requirements for transparency, new enforcement mechanisms. The same officials who had laughed at me sat listening. Different people now. The corrupt ones were gone, prosecuted, imprisoned, destroyed. But the new officials understood something their predecessors had not, that underestimating honest people was dangerous, that dismissing reform was risky, that corruption always eventually collapsed. These reforms will fundamentally change how infrastructure projects are approved and monitored, I said, presenting to cameras, to the public, to history. They will prevent the kind of systematic fraud we exposed, protect taxpayer money, restore public trust. The recommendations passed unanimously. No laughter this time, no dismissal, no jokes about experience or thinking levels, just serious attention, professional respect. Complete support. After the vote, several officials approached me, thanked me, praised my work, said they had always believed in reform. I smiled politely, accepted their words, but remembered the truth, remembered who had stood with me when it mattered, remembered who had stayed silent, remembered who had participated. Memory was power, truth was leverage, and I would never forget, would never let others forget, would never allow the narrative to be rewritten. This was not about political courage. This was about one person refusing to quit, refusing to accept, refusing to stay underestimated. 1 year after my dismissal, I gave a speech at the Policy Institute where I had started my career. Young analysts filled the room, people starting their careers, people who would face the same challenges I had faced. I told them my story, not the heroic version, not the simplified narrative, the real one. I was underestimated. I said clearly, not because I lacked value, not because I lacked skill, but because powerful people needed me to be irrelevant, needed me to be dismissed, needed me to be silent. The room was completely quiet. They ignored my work. They laughed at my proposals. They excluded me from decisions. And it hurt. It was humiliating. It felt like failure. I paused. But here's what they didn't understand. Being underestimated gave me freedom. Freedom to observe. Freedom to document. Freedom to prepare. While they forgot I existed, I was watching everything, seeing everything, recording everything. The students leaned forward. In politics, the most dangerous person is not the obvious opponent, not the loud critic, not the public reformer. It's the quiet observer, the underestimated analyst, The person you stop watching because you think they don't matter. I smiled. They ignored me. They laughed at me. They tried to erase me. But they made one critical mistake. They let me watch. They let me see their corruption. They let me document their crimes. And by the time they understood what I was doing, it was too late. I looked around the room, at young faces, at future reformers, at people who would face their own dismissals, their own exclusions, their own underestimation. If you're ever dismissed, ever excluded, ever made to feel irrelevant, remember this. That's when you're most dangerous. That's when you can see clearly. That's when you can change everything. I ended simply. I was underrated. Then I became unstoppable. Not because I was special, but because I refused to accept their definition of me. And neither should you